this is important to anybody that's watching. If you're an American, it's jury duty. It's not jury privilege. It's not something like, well, I don't want to do that. And I'll put it to you this way. If you don't do it, who will? If none of us show up, if none of us participate in this we the people government that we like to talk about, who will? I'll tell you who will. The government will.
Welcome in, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us here on Wild and Wired Media. We're so glad we could get you on here. So today we're going to be talking about what so many people are curious about. What is a grand jury exactly?
The grand jury is something that's very unique to the United States. There's only two countries in the world that use it, and that is the United States and Liberia, believe it or not. But Liberia copied our U.S. Constitution when they enacted themselves as a country. So they picked up the grand jury system there as well. But what a grand jury is a panel convened of citizens that are in the same jurisdiction. And their job is to review the evidence by the state just to make a determination. Is there enough evidence, enough probable cause, if you will, for the state to even continue with a prosecution or file formal charges against a citizen? It is a gateway that the state must pass through successfully to be able to prosecute a U.S. citizen. It's just another thing that helps keep us free and ensures our due process. It's really designed to protect us against retaliatory type of prosecutions, political prosecutions because I don't like you, not because, I don't really have evidence that you committed a crime. I just don't like you. So we as the state are going to prosecute you. But that's what the grand jury is.
When people think of grand jury, what do you think they usually imagine, and what does it actually look and feel like when you walk into the room?
I really don't know what your average citizen thinks when they hear grand jury. I mean, we hear a lot of negative things about it, like you could indict a ham sandwich. We hear about people who have received an indictment out of a grand jury. We hear the secret thing about a sealed grand jury indictment. You see that a lot on a federal level. But it's secretive for a couple of reasons. One is that the perpetrator, the accused, is not aware of what's going on, what's being said, and they don't have an opportunity to abscond, right? This is why they'll seal indictments. Give law enforcement and the government an opportunity to get someone into custody before you open up and say, hey, we've got felony charges on you. But I really couldn't tell you what people might think it is. I think most people believe, because it's got the connotation of a jury, they see courtroom. And it's really not that case, not that way. In the grand juries that I've testified in front of, I've literally walked in and the prosecutor's sitting on the table, swinging his feet off the ground, drinking a cup of coffee, literally going through and talking to the jury about facts of the law on a particular case. And we need to look at it more, I think, as more of an investigative body. The rules of evidence don't apply. We've got this Charlie Kirk thing going on, and there's been a lot of talk about this preliminary hearing that was done, and essentially it was unique because what you saw there is really what a grand jury does, and they allow hearsay. The rules of evidence are loosely suspended in some states, and on the federal level, the Supreme Court's ruled the rules of evidence don't apply to a grand jury. It's also secret. So it's like you can't go and witness what this is going on, but you can witness it with our show on Friday nights, The Grand Jury. It's pretty close as you can do it on a live stream as how a real grand jury is conducted, and some of the questions and answers that will come out of a grand jury.
So I'll share a personal story. So I've shared with you that I've been to prison before, and I remember getting the discovery for my case and all of that. And the first time I'd ever heard the term grand jury was when I found out that I had been indicted and a grand jury had convened. And in the county that I was in, it was like a smaller county. So Superior Court was only held like 1 week out of the month, So I guess the grand jury would convene. So that leads us into my next question for you, because I think a lot of folks would like to know, from investigation to grand jury. So If you can, take us from the beginning of a criminal investigation through the moment the case reaches the grand jury. How does it get there, and who makes the decisions along the way? So, does every serious criminal case follow the same path? How does the process vary by jurisdiction? And if you want to lead into inside the room once it reaches there, you pretty much walk through the process of what happens, but the first presentation of evidence through deliberation and the final vote.
All cases are going to originate with investigation. You've got to, before any action, law enforcement has to be able to develop probable cause, whether that be for enough probable cause to write a search warrant affidavit to search someone's home for, say, like narcotics, or whether it be an arrest warrant because you have enough information to believe that, Joe's committed a crime, and you get an arrest warrant to have Joe arrested and brought before the court. So there's a whole slew of avenues an investigation could take, but all investigations are trying to do one thing. They're trying to establish probable cause within the rules of evidence, within the Constitution, that is could be used in a courtroom. A police officer's job, and a lot of people say this, say that it's protect and serve and all this, but a police officer's job is to make lawful arrest, enforce the laws of the state, and keep the peace and make a lawful arrest. In order to make a lawful arrest, you have to develop probable cause. And probable cause, you're going to hear this a lot, so let's talk about what it is. Probable cause is a very low bar of being convinced, if you will. It is, it literally means more likely than not. More likely than not, a crime has occurred, and more likely than not, the defendant is responsible, has culpability in said crime. It doesn't say that they're guilty, doesn't say that they're not. It just says that there's something here. So as an investigator, you're going to conduct your investigation. You're going to put your reports together, all the pertinent information that you need to be able to establish, one, probable cause, two, you're really working your way down to beyond a reasonable doubt. You want to have evidence that is, empirical, not something that's guessing and my hunch. None of that works, by the way. Hunches you can't put in your report. I'm pretty sure you can't put in your reports and be able to display evidence that says I had a strong hunch and I'm a really good police officer, so you should listen to me.
No dreams.
No. What you're going to have to do when someone goes to jail, part of the paperwork, and this is in every state, an officer has to write an affidavit, a probable cause or PC affidavit. We'll call them arrest reports and other fancy names, but at the end of the day, that you're going to articulate what your probable cause was for arrest. This may not be your entire case, but it's going to be enough to convince the reader that, more likely than not a crime have occurred, and more likely than not the guy you arrested he or she has some sort of culpability in the crime. And that's the bar that you need to meet. So once the probable cause is established, you'll start seeing some arrests. You'll start seeing some search warrants, what we call law enforcement actions, right? There's investigations and then there's actions. Actions is when I arrest you. Actions is when you get your door kicked in. Actions are actions. Once you get this stuff put together, you're going to submit, in my state, you're going to submit it to your district attorney's office, which is a very powerful office when it comes to law enforcement and how our judicial system works. But the prosecutor is still a law enforcement entity. They're not on the judge's side. They're on the state. They're an attorney that represents the state. In this case, the state of Texas. But you're going to submit that. They're going to review it. And there's times where they say, you know what, you don't have enough in this case to even go forward with it. I won't even take it to a grand jury. But that would be very rare, because it's very easy for a district attorney, a prosecutor, to take your case and then go submit it to a grand jury. If the grand jury thinks that you have probable cause, good to go. It's kind of like my hands are clean there, right? I didn't say you didn't. I didn't say you did, but they did. And that honestly, the grand juries under the Constitution is more powerful than all the entities that I mentioned, to be honest with you, because it's an independent citizen review. So they're going to take this information and they're going to send it to the grand jury, present it to the grand jury. The grand jury is going to make a determination, just like the police officer did, just like we're asking the district attorney to do. Tell us whether you think probable cause exists for us to file formal charges on defendant A, which is Joe in this case. If they say yes, they're going to issue what's called a true bill, which really means the information you send here, we believe is true. True bill. and that's going to stimulate an indictment. That indictment is going to be your formal charges as a citizen that you are now formally being charged with a crime. Many people don't realize this. Let's say that I'm suspected of murder, and on today's date, I'm arrested and put in jail, but I don't get my case is not heard by a grand jury, and I don't get an indictment for 3 months, but I'm still in jail. I'm still arrested. I feel like I'm charged, but technically you're not quite charged yet. You're being held on what's called a detainer, a probable cause detainer, enough probable cause to believe that I committed a crime, and therefore I remain in jail on that unless I can make bond, or maybe in some cases no bond is issued. But once it goes through the process and goes to a grand jury, the grand jury is going to issue, in hopefully in my case not, but let's say they do, they issue a true bill, an indictment. That is technically the formal charges. I've formally been charged when the grand jury indicts me.
So let's talk about the secrecy and transparency. Why are grand jury proceedings secret? Who is bound by that secrecy? And how does the system balance secrecy with public accountability? And then that will lead us into public use of force cases.
The secrecy is for a few different reasons. One is to protect the integrity of the investigation, because the investigation doesn't stop at a grand jury. It's going to continue. And a lot of times you'll see, especially on the federal level, you'll see sealed indictments. On some states, you don't see a lot of sealed indictments. They don't quite like to do that. But they also have some more leniency there on we can take it to the grand jury when we need to, so to speak. You have to be balancing out when you actually arrest someone. The secrecy comes down to protect, one, the grand jurors and their discussions. This is secret. What's not secret out of a grand jury, and by the way, every grand jury has a court reporter, stenographer. They're recording everything that's being said in the grand jury. So it's not like it's secret, but it's not like the information is not existent what happens there. So if I were called to testify on your case as a witness to the grand jury, I'm not compelled to when I leave there, I can talk about what I talked about. I can say anything that I know about the grand jury when I leave. The grand jurors themselves are not allowed to speak about deliberations or anything that decisions made inside the grand jury. The prosecutor is not allowed to do that either. And typically some law enforcement, depending on where you're at in law enforcement, what your role was when you testified, you may or may not be able to speak about that, but it's still recorded. But the secrecy is there to protect the jurors, protect the integrity of the investigation, and also not forewarn anyone who may be indicted that arrest is forthcoming maybe.
So let's talk about police use of force cases, which is what your show is specialized in. What makes a police use of force case particularly complicated, or does it make it particularly complicated for a grand jury? And what evidence or legal questions become most important?
They're selected much like a regular jury in most jurisdictions and states. I believe in Texas, for sure, in the jurisdiction that I'm familiar with, it was voter registration. If you were a registered voter, your name number goes into this lottery. Now, way back when, they would literally take your card and put it into this 55-gallon drum and with a handle on it, and they'd spin it around, and you'd have somebody like the county clerk or somebody the judge decided would reach in and pick out, however many they need, 13, 14, 16, 18, however they're going to pull. And they'll pull those. Then they'll send a jury summons to those individuals that were pulled from the barrel. Now they use a computer system to randomly select the numbers. But once again, once the jury pool has been selected, you'll get a jury summons, and then you're going to go to the courthouse. They typically send you something in the mail, I think now, where you fill out a kind of a questionnaire. Are you a U.S. citizen? Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Anything that might exclude you from being on the jury. And then you're going to go to an empty courtroom. In Texas, the district court judge or the senior district court judge is going to handle the jury selection, grand jury selection process. And you're going to go through an abbreviated version of what's called voir dire. It's a French word for means literally speak the truth. You're going to be asked some questions. Prosecutor will ask a few questions. You're a felon? No, I'm not a felon. To get you on record that you do qualify to be on a grand jury, to serve on a grand jury. And then they'll ask about any workload hardships that may be there that could exclude you. You know, people love to get out of their jury duty as if, you know, I don't know who does it if you don't, but either way. They go through that process, and one of the things they're going to try to make a determination: do you have any affiliation with, say, the DA's office? Right? You know, they're you know, I have an assistant district attorney there that's dating my ex-wife, so you know, maybe would exclude you from that process. If you have any bias that are obvious that can't be overcome, may exclude you from being on the grand jury. But it's not as a formidable system or as detailed as you see with a with a regular jury pick. There you've got defense attorneys that are doing voir dire as well, looking for that perfect juror for their side. In a grand jury selection, there's no defense attorneys there. It's just the prosecutor, court reporter, potential jury pool, and the judge during this process. Once they select the juries they're going to select, they're going to serve for an extended period of time. It can be anywhere from 3 to 18 months, depending on the jurisdiction, federal, state, and wherever you're at.
Wait, they can serve for 3 to 18 months. Okay. Wow. That would make sense, though, because I'm sure they have a lot of cases to figure out what. Well,
they don't serve the way you're thinking. Like if you're selected for a jury trial, right? Once you go in to serve on that jury trial, you're there until it's done, right? They can even sequester you. You can't talk to anybody. It's not the way a grand jury works. They'll schedule it once a month. If it's a real active jurisdiction, they may have 2 a month for 1 or 2 days. So you'll be called in. You'll go into this room that I talked about. It's not a courtroom. It's going to have, you know, you can drink coffee. You eat hamburgers. It doesn't matter. It's a very informal setting. But you're going to go in there, and the prosecutor's going to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a big bucket of files. And they're going to go, okay, case number 1, this is a theft case, blah, blah, blah. They're going to explain all the elements of the offense there and say, this is why we believe there's probable cause. What do you think? And then the jury's going to mull it around. They'll go back and forth, and they'll say, well, we believe there is probable cause. They'll sign off on the paperwork, and then they'll pick up the next one. Here's where we go. Here's our next case. And they'll do that about 8 hours for 2 or 3 days, and they'll run through all of them. And that will be all the indictments for that jurisdiction that month, unless there's something special, right? Let's say you had a very heinous murder crime, and this is something that it's advantageous to get this indictment done very quickly. The prosecutor can call the grand jury in at any time. They're on recall. He could bring them in just to hear one case and get one indictment out of it. It's very rare, but I've seen it done, and it can be done. But when we say they serve for 3 to 18 months, depending on the jurisdiction, it doesn't mean that they're there every day. It means that they are subject to be called in whenever they're needed, whenever a panel needs to be convened to decide probable cause on some sort of a case that may be pending. So it's not like a regular jury. We call it a jury, but it's really not. In fact, it's an investigate. It's like a citizen law enforcement, if you will. They have the ability to subpoena. They have the ability to say, you know what, I want to hear from somebody that's not here. They can subpoena that witness. I knew of a deputy that was fishing 2 counties over in bib overalls. And we sent deputies out there to get him. Didn't have a cell phone on him, but his wife knew where he was at, went out there and picked him up out of the mud, put him in a car, and brought him back to the grand jury just so that he could testify. A grand jury has a lot of authority on that because they are a citizen review. It's not the government. These are the checkers of our government. It's we the people.
I like that, checks and balances. That's one thing that makes America so great. So one final question on, the specific jurors, and then we're going to move on to a couple other things. So do they get compensated? Don't jurors get compensated when they're called to serve? Like they get a little hourly wage? Does the same thing happen with grand jurors?
I think they call it a stipend, and it's a daily kind of a per diem is what it is. Probably enough to buy you lunch. And this is important. To anybody that's watching, if you're an American, it's jury duty. It's not jury privilege. It's not something like, well, I don't want to do that. And I'll put it to you this way. If you don't do it, who will? If none of us show up, if none of us participate in this we the people government that we like to talk about, who will? I'll tell you who will. The government will. How would you like to have a grand jury that's comprised of experts to make some sort of determination on your life if you've been accused with a crime? So It doesn't matter if they're paying. It's duty. It's your duty. If you want to be we the people, if we want to be this free nation that we talk about, it's you and I. If you're called, you need to stand up and serve your duty, whether they pay you a stipend or buy you a burger or not.
So let's talk about police use of force cases, which is what your show is specialized in. What makes a police use of force case particularly complicated, or does it make it particularly complicated for a grand jury? And what evidence or legal questions become most important?
Well, let's talk about two types of use of force. Now, you have use of force where police officer has the authority to use force to get compliance with the law or to take someone into custody if they resist. And there's some rules to that, right? You can use one level higher. If somebody's got their fist up and they want to fight, you could pull out your aspartame. You can go one level higher, but you wouldn't pull out your gun necessarily. That would not be reasonable. So for those type of cases, they are a little more clear cut. There's more law, there's more case law, and quite frankly, it's a little easier to understand. When it comes to justifiable use of force, when it comes to deadly force, the loss of life, a homicide. A homicide is not a crime. Homicide means one human caused the death of another. Whether it was intentional or not, it's still homicide. But unlawful homicide we call murder. You can't do that. But we also have justifiable homicide. And this is what a grand jury in many jurisdictions will be called upon to make some sort of determination. These are difficult. In fact, I say these are the most difficult cases we ask a jury, a panel of citizens to decide. Because we're asking them to decide something on an abstract, this reasonable person standard. What the reasonable person standard is that what would, in this case, a police officer, what would an average police officer, not the first day rookie on the job and not the 30-year veteran, but what is the minimum standard of reasonableness you could expect from a police officer given the set of circumstances that are available to them at the time, and which is different for every case. We also ask them to do this to the point that the force was used. Once the force has been used, you can't use what's found after that against the accused in this case. So go to the toy gun scenario. Police officer shows up to a park. You've got a call with a man with a gun. He approaches a man that matches the clothing description and says, "Hey, sir, may I talk to you?" This person pulls out of their pocket a black handgun and they point it at you. A reasonable person in this case would most likely believe this gun this implement is a real gun and respond with lethal force, killing the individual. Then when you go over to put them into handcuffs and to assess and probably give them some first aid, you realize that it's a BB gun. You were never in any real danger. But the standard is not that what you find out later. The standard ends at the point that the use of force is used. So in this case, the real question is not whether the officer's life was really in danger, not whether or not the 911 call was appropriate. The real simple question is that would the average officer believe that was a gun? You take a look at it. In our case, we watch the videos and we ask that. There are many times that officers have used deadly force against people with BB guns. But they don't know it's a BB gun, and the average person would not have known it was a BB gun either because it looks like a real gun. And I'll go back to this is why they're the most difficult cases for our jurors to decide, because many of us, our curiosity gets to us. We see it in the grand jury. They want to know more. Well, was it a real gun, or what was he doing before? What did he have for breakfast? They just were curious, and we want to know this. But the grand jury is not there the evidence is not there to satisfy your curiosity. We're there to ask a very simple question: is it reasonable to believe? Is it reasonable for the officer to have believed that their life was in danger, or the third person's life was in danger, or serious bodily injury? Because at that point, that person, police officer or not, has the right to defend their life. We all have this inherent right given to us by God. We don't have to lay down and submit our neck to the wolf. We can fight. Whether we're successful or not, we can fight. A police officer has that as well. So to answer your question, I think that justifiable use of force when it comes to justifiable homicide is one of the most difficult cases that we wrestle with, both at the grand jury level and even inside of a courtroom.
I couldn't agree with you more. And just on a personal note, I'd like to rewind back to what you were saying, referring to the toy gun, BB gun, because there was a case last week where a woman had a what looked to be a gun in between her legs in the driver's seat, and that was a source of contention. And we all understood that her natural reaction was, here, let me just show you that it's not real. But in the officer's eyes, it was just a whole bad situation. So did you want to touch on that a little bit?
That's a textbook to my example of a toy gun. This is and I'm sure you'll probably show the video. It's a woman that's initially getting stopped for minor traffic violations, but she doesn't stop. She continues on. It's not a high-speed chase. She's just not yielding. She goes a couple of turns, I would say a couple of blocks, before she finally yields to the police officer, and she's in the middle of the road, the turning lane. Well, he gets out to make contact with her, window down. She's not hinked up, as we would say. She's actually pretty calm, and he's explained to what he's doing. He's pulling her over, and he sees in her lap she's got a pistol between her legs, laying on the seat that she's sitting on. And he says, "Hey, don't touch that." And she's like, "Oh." And you know what she's about to say. "Oh, that's not a real gun," but she doesn't get that out as she reaches down to grab it. He's saying, "No, don't touch that. No, don't touch that." He draws his weapon and he shoots her, and he shoots her in the face. Now, she survived. But the question in that case, and our question to our grand jury was not, was it a BB gun? Not whether even the traffic stop was lawful. Was it reasonable for the officer to believe that it was, one, a real gun, that his life was in danger? Was it reasonable for him to defend himself at that point? And I think our jurors said yes, and honestly, I agree with it as well. It was not a very wise thing for that lady to do, was to pick up the gun at that point. Now, we like to do this on the grand jury. Everybody's like, "Well, what you should have done was," well, sure, what you should have done was listen to the officer. What he said was, "Keep your hands where I can see them." If she had done that, she would never have been shot, but she wasn't. And I think in that particular case, I don't think she meant anything by it. I think she was truly going, oh. Once I hold this up, you'll see that it's a BB gun. You'll understand that you're not in threat. The problem is that the BB guns today, they don't have the red tips on them. These airsoft pistols, these things look pretty damn real. Now, the diameter of the barrel may be different, but look at that. You want me to do a close inspection as you hold the pistol to me so I can see that the barrel's not pistol caliber? No, it's way too late. As a police officer, if you haven't shot somebody, by that point, you're probably going to lose that gunfight, right? Action is always faster than reaction, and police officers have that in mind. They always want their action to be just ahead of yours.
We are going to move into the grand jury live stream, which is what we're here to talk about. It's an amazing show. So based on the episodes that have been produced, where does the grand jury reflect the real process? Where does it differ, if it does differ? And what have our jurors revealed about how the public interprets these cases?
They worked themselves up into two cases, a little bit of deliberations. Let's get serious now with case number 3.
All right, guys, welcome back. Here we go. Case number 3.
Our mock grand jury is actually pretty close. Now, a real grand jury is going to have a lot more evidence. Not would they just have body-worn camera like we show. They're going to have testimony. They're going to have evidence. They're going to have interrogations. They're going to have forensic reporting. So they're going to have a pretty thorough report and much more detailed evidence than we can do in a 2-hour show. But on the realistic side of it is that we are asking essentially the same question. Was it reasonable to believe that the officer believed their life was in danger? And if the answer is yes, it doesn't matter if he used a gun, doesn't matter if they use a brick or drive them over with a car. Any force that you can use to save your life when you believe that's what you need to do, you have a God-given right to do so. So that would make it justified. In our show, I think a lot of people, because I ask questions, we'll watch the video, we get down to the deliberations. I don't really let just like, I don't turn them loose and like, just let me know what you think. I ask questions. And I kind of get a poll of where everybody's at right in the beginning. And like, 2 of them are like, I think I'm leaning towards justified on it. Feels pretty good to me on justified. And one says, no, I'm leaning towards not justified. Then we'll dig into it. But I press each and every one of our jurors to hang their hat on it. something I hadn't mentioned, but something that's very important about the whole process of being charged with the crime is that we have a Fourth Amendment right, a constitutional right, to be judged with what's called objective reasonableness. This means not hunches. This is not your feelings, not how you feel about it. Like, I don't really like that guy because I knew a guy like him once, and so he must be guilty. That's not the evidence we're looking for. And jurors are instructed that I call it hanging your hat on. You need to have something that is objective out of the evidence that was presented to you that you can hang your hat on, not just your gut or your feeling. And I will press our jurors on the grand jury that if you just said, tell me you feel that way, that's not going to be good enough. I'm going to press you till you give me a point in the video, something that's stuck with you that makes you think that way. You know, we've had things in the past that were kind of odd sometimes. You know, we've had one individual that he stuck on that didn't think it was justified, mainly because the guy was wearing pajamas. Now, I'm not beating anybody up for it, and this is what's great about our jury system is that if you want to stand on that, then you can, because you're the citizen, it's we the people. Now, he was outvoted, of course, but it's very much like a real grand jury, and it's informal. In fact, we're probably more formal on the grand jury show than an actual real grand jury, especially the third or fourth session with the same people that are going to be on there for 6 months, right? They get to know the prosecutor gets to know them, they get to know the people they're sitting there with. You know, hey, here's Jim, how you been doing, Jim? How the grandkids? You'll have that kind of conversation in there because they have been seated together for some time. But I think our grand jury is a pretty good depiction of how a real grand jury goes. And I know I'm right on target when it comes to the questions and the level of convincing that we're asking our jury to be at that probable cause level. We nail that. That's exactly how a grand jury goes.
And on a side note, I did want to piggyback what you were saying. So, you know, imagine, like you said, I think that's a great setup that they serve for, like, what did you say, 6 to 18 months, 3 to 18 months, and they can kind of...
Depending on the jurisdiction, on the federal level, I think they serve 18 months, some time, and then some smaller jurisdictions, they may serve 6. So depending on the state, if it's a state crime or a state court that the grand jury convenes for, they'll be beholden to the state constitution and the state laws. If it's a federal grand jury that's being convened by federal court, they would be beholden to the federal court or the federal statutes and the constitutional law.
About how many cases, and the reason I said that it was a good reason, it was good that they all kind of had that length of term. How many cases will a grand jury decide on within that time frame, or when they're called? How many cases are they looking at? Just one or more than one?
When they convene a grand jury, let's say it's 6 months, right? So they're going to at least meet 6 times, once a month at least. No jurisdiction's going longer than 30 days without convening a grand jury, because you'll start to run out of people to prosecute. They're in jail, but they have no indictment. You can't move forward without the indictment. So it's a process that has to happen. So let's say they're going to meet once a month. 2 or 3 days, full days is what they'll have, and the prosecutor will submit all the cases they have that are ready to go to a grand jury. They'll submit all of those in that grand jury session, and at the end of that, they will issue all the true bills and all the no bills. Right? If you're sitting in jail getting no bills, a great thing for you. You'll be able to get out. If you're there and you get a true bill, then the process will continue. You've just been formally charged. So there's not a number you can put on it. However many that jurisdiction has in the time period that you serve, if they're felony crimes, the grand jury decided. And that panel is the one that will sit and decide that.
So you mentioned, you know, let's think about the grand jury, the show. So getting 5 fresh jurors on there, and I'll be putting details on if you want to serve as a juror, do your duty. We will be sure to include that. So with that said, you know, when you invite people to come on and stream and all of that stuff, so in the real world, they're kind of sitting around a table. It's very informal. So when you ask the questions that you do to the jurors, it's basically the same as if they would be in that room, except you might have to ask them a little bit more because of the nervousness of being on a live stream or something like that. But basically, you're doing the same exact thing as would be done in a regular grand jury setting.
Very much like it. Now, you'll see, the prosecutor is the one that's kind of running the show, presenting the evidence there. So it depends on how the prosecutor is going to run it. But the prosecutor may not poll the juries like I do, but I do that to stimulate some conversation, just get things moving. But they will field questions. They'll ask, does anybody have any questions? And they may ask, how you feeling on this? How you feeling on that? And if a couple of jurors say, hey, I'm not sure yet, or I have a question about some evidence, they'll have a very informal discussion about that. They could just ask the prosecutor sitting on the table drinking a cup of Starbucks about, well, I don't know about this. What does the law say about that? Now, prosecutor should stick to facts of law, right? Shouldn't give too much personal opinion there. But I'll be honest with you, it probably would be allowable in most states that the prosecutor would be able to weigh in on what they thought about it. Because once again, this is not a courtroom. The rules of evidence don't apply. Hearsay, right? There's a lot of things that can be said inside of a grand jury that will never make it into courtroom because we have some constitutional rights, like the Sixth Amendment, to be able to examine all evidence. There's no evidence that's going to be presented in a grand jury that's going to be examined during that grand jury. The jurist in this case, the grand jury, they won't experience any cross-examine or challenge of any of the evidence that's there. It's left up to them to make their own decision as to how much weight they give on the evidence that they see. But yes, it's very similar to what we do on the grand jury.
I want you to leave the viewers with 3 biggest mistakes that people make when they encounter law enforcement as to how these situations can come up. And then I want you to give the viewers 3 top things they can do to make sure this never happens to them and that they don't find themselves like following orders or, that things don't escalate on the part of the citizen when.
But there's not 3 things. There's only one.
Okay, let's do it.
Just follow instructions. Look, our expert witness, Jason on the grand jury, said many times, he said, of all the cases we've done over the last 3 years, every one of those people that had deadly force used against them would still be alive, and no deadly force would have been used against them if they just complied with law enforcement's directives, right or wrong. And there's many times officers are wrong. There's many times that there's a mistake of fact. There's a misunderstanding, some different perception. All of these things can happen in the few seconds of a tense encounter. What I suggest is if you think the officer is wrong because you weren't speeding, take it to court. Your Constitution says you have that right. If you are arrested for a felony crime and you don't believe that you did it or you don't think that you have an arrest warrant, take it up in court. The time to do it is not on the roadside. Law enforcement officers are there to enforce the law. And it's not just enforce, take the N away from it. They will force it on you one way or the other because that's not the place to argue. I used to tell folks when they wanted to argue with me about, say, a citation on the roadside, I was like, look, if I was a judge, I'd wear a robe and my hours would be better and we could just argue about it all day long. But you're not going to convince me. I'm pretty sure I'm writing a citation. I'm pretty sure what I saw. So if you want to argue this, I'm more than happy to meet you in court. Let's do that. But the place to argue is in court. That's why we call them arguments. And that's why we put on arguments. It's your constitutional right to go give them hell in the courtroom, but you have no constitutional right to give them hell on the roadside. My suggestion is listen to law enforcement and follow those directions, especially in the first 30 or 40 seconds of a critical incident like that. Things will get, if it seems tense in the beginning, follow the directions and things will get less intense as it goes by, I promise you.
I love that. One thing, y'all, one thing. I will tell y'all what I do if I ever get pulled. Not that it happens on a regular basis, but especially at nighttime, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock position, right? And I follow instruction. I wait for the officer to come up, tell me what to do, and just follow the instruction. And it's not Judge Dredd out there, y'all. You don't want the officer having to, which is not our law system anyway, but could you imagine what kind of world it would be if it was like a Judge Dredd system where the officer that pulls you over goes ahead and tries you, then you're convicted? That would be a horrible world to live in. So I like the grand jury system. I like the concept of it. I like the concept of the jury system. So, wow, Joe, you've got a good thing going. So why don't you tell people a little bit how long it's been going, how long you've been doing it, and where you see it going from here?
Well, we've actually been doing this about 3 years. We initially started out with the same people each week. We'd meet on Friday, review police use of force videos, and we would debate it out. After having the same people on for so long, about a year and a half, we noticed that it wasn't very exciting anymore. There really wasn't much more debate. We're seeing it, okay, yeah, well, it's this way, or yep, we believe that way. Because we'd been doing it for so long together, and I had law enforcement officers like one level. I had three groups in here, if you will. Law enforcement, then we had what we call legal minds. Sometimes they were attorneys. Some people had just some legal education, and then we had just general citizens, people that had no association to law enforcement, whatever. So these were the three groups that we would talk about use of force and whether it was right or not. In the beginning, we had some very spirited debates, right? But after a while, people started to learn about the 21-foot rule. They started understanding the reasonableness and how that's important. It doesn't really matter if it was a toy gun, if you didn't know, if it was believable that it wasn't. So we got away from having much debate, and honestly, it got boring. So we come up with the idea, we'd find 5 people off of social media. You know, I'm on X, I do a lot of X spaces, and I'll tell you what, people will throw elbows. Everybody's just jumping up and down to grab a mic in one of those and give us their opinion on something. So I really believe that putting this together would be quite simple, finding 5 new people each week. We chose 5, so just like a grand jury, it's a unanimous vote. I mean, it's not a unanimous vote, so a majority wins. So we didn't want to have ties. In a real grand jury, I think they're odd for that exact reason. I don't think they can have ties in there either. But either way, the most difficult thing I have is finding people to come on and participate in the show on a weekly basis. But we're standing down with it. We're standing hard on the fact that we're not going to have repeat jurors. We may do some special shows that we do have repeat jurors on there. But for the most part, every Friday night, you can expect 5 new people, 5 new cases, so we can get a fresh look in the jury's perspective. I think the most interesting thing about this show is to seeing how 5 regular Americans, each and every one of them, could be picked for a grand jury tomorrow, or to serve on a real trial jury. They're all eligible to be we the people in our justice system at any given time. So there's no reason why we can't put them on a mock grand jury and run them through the gambit that way. But it's very interesting to see how people from different backgrounds, from different ways of life, different experiences, how they will all watch the same evidence and they'll have such a different perspective on it. So the old adage that says that depends on what you see, depends on from where you sit, we get to see that every Friday night. Now, where this show goes, it depends. It depends on the popularity. If it keeps growing the way it is, I think the sky's the limit. I don't know where that's going to land, but we're growing. People seem to like it. I enjoy doing it, and I think it serves both a vital role in some entertainment, but also a little civics. Understand how our system works, because the news media says it one way, pundits will say another, but I'll be honest with you, it's very difficult to find a real good read on any social media or media out there that really describes how our juris and justice system really works. And it's a very important part of our society, very important part of being individually free. It's the mechanism that'll take your freedom away. So we need to understand it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Y'all heard that. 5 jurors, your opportunity to serve on a mock grand jury before you might possibly be called for a real grand jury. I'm going to be attaching the information. You'll see it floating up on the screen. Y'all be sure to go check out at Joe_Lnu. You'll see it on the screen on Patreon, also YouTube. Watch time hours are the most important. So this is the way we can help the grand jury grow from an educational standpoint as well as an entertainment. I guarantee you will be entertained, whether you're a viewer or whether you have the courage to want to come up on and serve as a grand juror.
Did you ever get any money from Costello?
No.
So you also known as Duck Torella?
Every Friday night, 9 p.m.
I
Eastern.
refuse to answer on the grounds of made attentive.
5 new jurors. Review. Police use of force. Watch them deliberate.
Get any money?
They decide. Reasonable or
Money
not.
from any of those fellas.
None of those
None of those fellas.
How will they judge? The grand
I
jury.
don't even speak to the. I mean, I met that Charlie once or twice. I don't even talk to him.
You don't like him?
No.
Follow, subscribe, described and
An
comment.
incarcerated individual's use of institutional telephones constitutes consent, and your calls may be provided to law enforcement agencies. Thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.